In 2023, Britain sent just 14 Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine. 14, a number so small the Kremlin laughed. But the laughter didn't last. Within weeks, Russian commanders began reporting something they'd never seen before. Tanks dying at distances where they couldn't even see their killer. Armored columns shredded before they could react. Crews abandoning burning T-72s without understanding who hit them or from where. Ukraine's tankers had a new nickname for the Challenger 2, the Sniper. Because this wasn't a tank. It was a precision-guided long-range execution machine, a British beast built with classified Dorchester armor, a rifled gun that behaves like artillery, and a fire control system that turns the battlefield into mathematics. Russian tanks burn. The Challenger 2 does not. Not in Iraq, not in Kosovo, and now, not under the heaviest fire Russia can throw in Ukraine. Britain sent 14. Yet to the Russian army, it feels like 1,400. This is how a 1990s British war machine became Russia's worst 21st century nightmare. And why every time a Challenger 2 rolls into position, the Kremlin's drones, infantry, tanks, and helicopters all have one job. Find it before it finds them, because if it finds them first, they will not survive. Russia went into this war expecting Western tanks to behave like Russian tanks. Blunt instruments, close-range brawlers, armored fists meant to crash into enemy lines and trade hits until one side ran out of steel. But what rolled onto the Ukrainian front instead was something entirely outside that playbook, the Challenger 2. A tank designed not to duel at point-blank range but to kill from distances where Russian crews still think they're safe. While every modern Russian tank relies on a smoothbore gun built for short, fast engagements, the Challenger 2 fires a 120mm rifled cannon, a weapon engineered for accuracy, stability, and brutal long-range penetration. It doesn't lob shells, it threads them. Every groove inside that barrel exists to turn a tank round into a precision-guided sledgehammer, stabilizing it like a sniper's bullet. Russian commanders call this unfair. Ukrainian crews call it something else, the Sniper. Because when a Challenger 2 opens fire, it's not dueling, it's executing. Its fire control computer reads the battlefield like an equation. Wind speed, humidity, target movement, distance. It calculates every variable Russian tanks simply ignore or cannot measure. And the result is a weapon that can destroy armor at ranges where the enemy can't even return fire. The Russians weren't ready for this. Their doctrine assumes battles begin at 1 and 2 kilometers, but the Challenger 2 starts killing far earlier, hitting vehicles before the crews inside even realize they're being hunted. To Russian tankers raised on Soviet-era tactics, this wasn't just unexpected, it was terrifying. They were being outranged, outthought, and outgunned by a machine built for a kind of warfare they were never trained to face. But accuracy is only the first thing Russia learned to fear. If you're enjoying this deep dive, please like the video and consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us bring more global insights. Now, back to the video. The first time Russian crews realized something was wrong was when vehicles started exploding at distances no one believed possible. Ukrainian tankers from the 82nd Air Assault Brigade recorded a confirmed kill at 5.3 kilometers, a distance at which most tanks can barely identify a target, let alone destroy one with a single precise shot. To put that in perspective, Russian T-72s and T-90s are designed to fight at roughly 2 to 3 kilometers. Beyond that, their accuracy collapses, their optics struggle, and their rounds lose penetrating power. The Challenger 2 does not play by those rules. Its 10-kilometer engagement envelope is not a rumor or a brochure promise. It's a battlefield reality. While it rarely fires at the absolute maximum range, the fact that it can instantly shifts the psychological balance. Russian armor commanders know now, if they're spotted, they can be killed before they ever get close enough to retaliate. The machine's secret isn't just the rifled cannon, it's the brain behind it. The Challenger 2's fire control system can lock, track, and store multiple targets simultaneously, performing ballistic calculations in milliseconds. A gunner can cycle through targets with a button press, firing with the confidence of a pilot launching guided munitions. Meanwhile, the laser rangefinder, capable of accurate readings out to 6.2 miles, turns the battlefield into a mapped grid where every Russian vehicle becomes a marked coordinate. Russian crews describe it as fighting an enemy who always sees first, shoots first, and hits first, because that's exactly what it is. Ukrainian operators often position the Challenger 2 deep in tree lines or fortified positions, Fire once, adjust with drone correction, fire again, and erase a target long before Russian optics can even acquire them. By the time Russian drones relay the shot's origin, the tank has already relocated. For Russian armor, it's a nightmare. You're being hunted by a machine that kills from beyond your horizon. And even when the Russians finally closed the distance, they still couldn't kill it. When Ukrainian crews first climbed into the Challenger 2, they didn't just enter another NATO tank, they stepped inside the closest thing the modern battlefield has to a moving fortress. The reason is one word Russia hates to hear: Dorchester. Born from the legendary Chobham armor of the Cold War, Dorchester remains one of Britain's most closely guarded military secrets. Its exact composition is classified even today, decades after the tank first entered service. What is known is simple: it stops things that should not be stoppable. Russia learned this the hard way. Alexander, a Ukrainian tanker, told the story that instantly spread across the entire brigade. His Challenger 2 took a direct hit during a Russian helicopter rocket attack. The warhead punched 720 millimeters deep into the armor, an impact that would have turned most tanks into a crematorium. But Dorchester didn't break. The tank kept moving. The crew walked away. The mission continued. In a war where one lucky hit can erase an entire crew, that kind of protection isn't just technology, it's salvation. And for Russian gunners, it's infuriating. Their APFSDS rounds, designed to pierce even advanced Western tanks, fail catastrophically against Dorchester's layered composite structure. The geometry, the spacing, the classified inner materials, everything is engineered to disrupt penetration, deform incoming rounds, and dissipate energy before it reaches the crew. Russian tankers have reported rounds simply disappearing into the Challenger's armor with no visible effect. Unlike Soviet designs, which treat crew survival as secondary to firepower, the British doctrine is brutally clear: protect the crew at all costs. Every panel, blowout system, and armored compartment is designed around that philosophy. For Ukrainian forces, this meant something new: a tank that consistently refused to die. And that survivability changed how Ukraine used the tank entirely. Ukraine didn't scatter the Challenger 2s across different units. They concentrated all 14 tanks into one formation, the 82nd Air Assault Brigade, a unit already known for mobility, discipline, and high-skill operators. If Ukraine only had 14 of these beasts, then every single one had to be used with absolute precision. The brigade immediately developed a doctrine built around the Challenger's strengths. They rarely sent a single tank alone. Instead, the vehicles hunted in pairs, one Challenger 2 acting as the killer, the other outfitted with electronic warfare systems to blind, jam, or disrupt Russian drones. In a war where quadcopters and Lancets stalk every ridgeline, this pairing wasn't optional, it was survival. Their firing positions were just as intentional. Challengers were tucked into tree lines, orchard lanes, and camouflage depressions, turning the battlefield into a long-range ambush zone. They would fire a devastating shot, often corrected by drone operators hovering miles above, then immediately relocate before Russian artillery, helicopters, or loitering munitions could respond. This was the brigade's rhythm: shoot, relocate, disappear, repeat. A disappearance that frustrated Russian reconnaissance and infuriated artillery units who could never pin down where the British-built ghosts were hiding. And then came Kursk, the surprise Ukrainian offensive that smashed straight across the border in early 2025. Russian forces expected light infantry and armored cars. What they got were Challenger 2s rolling through their outer defenses and tearing apart armored screening elements that had no idea these tanks had been quietly repositioned. The shock was immediate. Russian units panicked, communications spiked, reports flooded in about British tanks appearing out of nowhere and destroying vehicles before retreating back into the tree cover. The 82nd Brigade had turned 14 tanks into a psychological weapon. A roaming threat the Russians could never quite see, never reliably target, and never confidently approach. But the real terror came when Russia saw what the Challenger 2 could do to their armor, without even getting close. The Challenger 2 doesn't win by trading blows. It wins by changing the terms of engagement. Its rifled 120mm cannon does something almost every modern tank designer stopped caring about. It stabilizes and guides a projectile like a sniper's barrel guides a bullet. The spin imparted by the rifling turns each round into a far more predictable, accurate projectile at long range. Where a smoothbore round drifts and preys, a rifled round threads the target. That accuracy lets the Challenger use types of ammunition and firing profiles Russians simply aren't set up to counter. High-explosive squash head and specialized long-range penetrators behave differently when delivered with that stability. They strike with a focused, devastating effect that disrupts armor arrays, induces lethal sprawl, and ruins optics and sensors without necessarily punching a neat hole. In practice, that means a T-72's reactive tiles and an older T-90's composite layers stop being a reliable defense. They're fragments waiting to be broken apart by correctly placed, mathematically calculated impacts. Then there's charm-style long-range munitions and purpose-built rounds engineered for rifled barrels, lighter flight deviation, flatter trajectories, and terminal effect optimized for modern hull shapes. When a Challenger 2 fires at 3 to 5 kilometers, the shot doesn't hope to kill. It expects to put the target out of action on the first impact. Worse for the Russians, Ukrainian drone teams turned every engagement into a guided strike. Drones spot, correct, and feed, aiming offsets in real time. The Challenger executes the corrected shot, and the Russian tank, still operating on doctrines built for visual sightlines and 2 to 3 kilometers of firefights, dies before it can adapt. The result is tactical obsolescence. Whole formations find their standard tactics defeated not by numbers but by precision, timing, and sensor fusion. The math is brutal. Kill before detection, disable before return fire, and force the enemy to either retreat or walk into an ambush they can't see. And yet, the Challenger's legend didn't come from what it killed. It came from what refused to die. Russian strike doctrine has not been a single thing. It's been a toolkit. Loitering Lancets, guided ATGMs, helicopter-launched missiles, massed artillery. But against the Challenger 2, that toolbox has repeatedly shown holes the size of a hatch. Lancet loitering drones work when they find an abandoned target. They are cheap, clever, and lethal. But they need a stationary prize. That's why the first confirmed Challenger loss followed a mine strike. Immobilized, abandoned, and then finished by a Lancet. The drone didn't beat Dorchester in a direct fight. It finished what an earlier threat had started. In other words, the Lancet is an opportunist, not a miracle weapon. Anti-tank guided missiles have also underperformed as a silver bullet. Chieftains of Russian ATGM doctrine expect a kill on impact. Crews expected tanks to be a single-shot vulnerability. But multiple engagements show Challenger 2 crews walking away from ATGM strikes that should have been fatal. The British blowout panels, separated propellant stowage, and layered protection turned many hits into survivable events. ATGMs that punch through external modules often fail to reach the crew compartment or to trigger catastrophic ammunition detonation. Attack helicopters are more dangerous, especially when they score a clean Vickers hit. A Call 52 strike that detonates stored rounds is terrifyingly effective, and where helicopters achieve line of sight and a vulnerable angle, they can deliver lethal results. But those are limited opportunities. Helicopters must expose themselves to long-range anti-air and EW assets to achieve that angle, and Ukraine's paired EW tactics frequently deny them clean shots. Crucially, the Challenger's frontal arc offers almost no easy weak spot. Russian doctrine that relies on high-velocity kinetic strikes or forward-facing shaped charges finds little purchase in Dorchester's geometry. Most Russian weapons either over-penetrate without detonation, deform on the composite layers, or shatter before they can translate kinetic energy to lethal effect. Still, even a monster has blind spots, and Russia exploited every one. So let's put the myths to bed and talk about the real losses. Factually, brutally, without polish. The Challenger 2 has been hit, damaged, destroyed, and filmed burning. But every loss tells the same story. Circumstances killed these tanks, not Russian armor superiority. Loss number 1, mine, crew survives, tank abandoned, Lancet finishes it. Loss number 2, Kursk, a direct drone strike. That set off. Stored ammunition. During operations near Kursk, a Challenger suffered a direct drone-delivered munition hit on exposed ammo. Deadly? Yes. Proof of Russian tank superiority? Not even close. Loss number 3. Ka-52 Vickers missile. Kill. This is the most legitimate combat kill on the list, and even that required a near-ideal engagement window. Russia has claimed 6, 7, even 8 Challenger kills. The reality is closer to 3 confirmed total losses, possibly 4 depending on how one classifies catastrophic damage versus irrecoverable abandonment. Every other kill video Moscow pushes is misidentified, recycled, or outright fabricated. And here's the framing that matters. None of these losses came from tank-on-tank defeat. No T-72, T-80, or T-90 has ever scored a confirmed clean frontal kill on a Challenger 2 in Ukraine. Not one. But even after these hits, the Challenger's kill or loss ratio remains something Russian generals can only dream about. The Challenger 2 didn't just outperform Russian tanks, it surprised many inside NATO by overshadowing America's own battlefield icon, the M1 Abrams. Not because the Abrams is weak, but because the British built their tank around a different philosophy, one that happened to be perfect for Ukraine's war. The Abrams sent to Ukraine were downgraded export variants. Their famous depleted uranium armor, the secret sauce behind US tank survivability, was removed. This left them with significantly lighter, less protective composite packages. The Challenger 2, by contrast, arrived with its full Dorchester composite, unchanged, undiluted, not watered down. Britain didn't send a polite export model, they sent the real thing. The Abrams uses a 120mm smoothbore, like most Western tanks. It's powerful, accurate, and deadly. But the Challenger's 120mm rifled L-30A1 is a different creature. It hits harder at long range. It fires HESH rounds designed to smash fortifications and disable vehicles, even without direct penetrations. It turns long-distance duels into British target practice. In Ukraine, where engagements can stretch across kilometers of open fields, the Challenger simply had the better tool for the job. And then there's the crew feedback. Ukrainian crews who operated both platforms offered consistent, unfiltered observations. The Abrams was faster. The Abrams was more agile. But the Challenger felt safer. Crews repeatedly said the Challenger gave them a sense of confidence, not bravado, but trust. Trust in the armor, trust in the gun, trust that if they made a mistake, the tank would still bring them home. And in a war where survival determines whether a tank crew fights again tomorrow, that mattered more than raw horsepower. But none of this mattered if the tank couldn't move. And that's the Challenger's Achilles heel. For all its strengths, the Challenger 2 does have enemies, but they aren't Russian tanks. Its biggest threats come from physics, terrain, and the new face of modern warfare. At 71 tons, the Challenger 2 is the heaviest tank operating in Ukraine. That weight gives it unmatched protection, but it also creates brutal limitations. Certain bridges are simply unusable. Soft ground becomes a trap. Recovery vehicles struggle to tow it if things go wrong. In the wet Ukrainian autumn, this mass can turn from shield to anchor. Also, the Perkins CV-12 engine delivers around 1,200 horsepower, which is respectable, but not for a tank this heavy. And the result? Slow acceleration, poor fuel efficiency, reduced agility in tight, muddy terrain. Against drones and artillery, mobility is survival. And there are moments when the Challenger feels like it's fighting the Earth itself more than the enemy. Ukraine's black soil also has stopped armies for centuries. For the Challenger, that mud packs into the tracks, saps engine power, creates perfect drone targets if the tank bogs down. It's not a Russian victory when a Challenger gets stuck. It's nature doing the killing. The age of drones punishes anything that stops moving. The Challenger can survive hits from Russian missiles, shells, even some ATGMs, but a stationary tank under a hovering drone is eventually doomed. Lancets and FPV drones don't care how thick the armor is if they can attack hatches, optics, or... And still, even with all these flaws, Russia still can't stop it. For decades, Russian doctrine relied on mass. More tanks, more shells, more bodies. Ukraine, armed with just 14 Challenger 2s, shattered that belief. Every long-range kill was a reminder that Soviet-era armor philosophy, overwhelm, swarm, push forward, collapses against Western precision. The Challenger 2 turned open fields into kill zones. It forced Russian tank units to adapt, to hide, to rethink everything they were trained for. A single precision platform, used correctly, can defeat an entire mechanized doctrine built on numbers. And that leads to the final question. The one Russia can't escape. Is Russia ready for a tank it can't kill? Russia has thousands of tanks. Ukraine has 14 British ones, but only one side is afraid. And that fear raises the only question that matters now. What happens when Britain sends more? If you found this analysis valuable, please consider subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into geopolitics. We would love to hear your thoughts. Drop your comments below and let us know what you think. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.